The sound of shattering glass still echoes in my ears. It was the moment my father, the CEO of Lancaster Technologies, violently pushed me through his office door. Blood was already warm on my face, soaking into my silk blouse, but as I looked up from the glittering shards, a strange calm settled over me. I smiled, a chilling promise escaping my lips. You just lost everything. That night, I exposed the truth behind their pristine empire, and by morning, the perfectly constructed world lay in ruins. But let's rewind. My story, really, began long before that night of broken glass. I was born into a world of privilege, the only child of Harold and Grace Lancaster. My father, Harold, had built Lancaster Technologies from the ground up, expanding the medical device company my grandfather, William, started in his garage over 40 years ago. By the time I arrived, our life was a sprawling 20,000 square foot estate overlooking the Pacific. My earliest, cherished memories of sitting on my grandfather's knee. He'd tell me about the life-saving devices we made. Audrey, he'd say, his eyes crinkling at the corners. One day, all of this will be yours to protect. Remember, business is about more than just profit. It's about purpose. My mother, Grace, was the true heart of our family. She championed children's hospitals, donating millions, and she ingrained in me that privilege carried immense responsibility. Every Christmas, she'd take me to deliver gifts to kids in those hospitals. Look them in the eyes, she'd instruct me. Everyone deserves dignity. Then, everything shattered for the first time. I was 12. Mom was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer, and within 3 agonizing months, she was gone. My world crumbled. My father, he retreated completely into his work, leaving me adrift, grappling with my grief alone. I'd spend hours in her closet, inhaling the faint, sweet scent of her perfume, desperately trying to conjure the sound of her laugh, to remember her vibrant spirit. Just 11 months after my mother's funeral, she arrived. Stephanie. My father introduced her as his new girlfriend. 6 weeks later, they were married. She was 20 years his junior, with perfectly manicured nails that, I remember vividly, dug into my shoulder every time she hugged me for the cameras. We are going to be such good friends, darling, she'd coo, while flashes lit up the room. 2 days later, her son, Douglas, moved in. He was 17, undeniably handsome, and immediately, my father's entire world shifted. What began as showing him the ropes quickly morphed into a full-blown grooming for the heir apparent. I, the actual daughter, was relegated to the background, literally pushed out of frame in our family photos. Yet, despite all of this, I thrived. I graduated high school as valedictorian, earned my business degree from Stanford with highest honors, and completed my MBA by 23. While Douglas was, shall we say, struggling through a business degree at a local university, I was already developing patents that would become cornerstone products for Lancaster Technologies. My grandfather, bless his heart, always saw something in me. Before his death, when I was 18, he'd sneak me into board meetings. Watch how they negotiate, he'd whisper. Notice who speaks and who listens. The other board members would chuckle, calling me William's little shadow. They had no idea I was absorbing absolutely everything. One of them, Victor Chan, became my mentor after my grandfather passed. After my MBA, it was Victor who helped me land a position at a competing firm. He said, "Your father needs to see your value from the outside. Sometimes, family can't recognize the talent right in front of them." So, for 4 years, I built my own reputation. My innovations put my name on the map, completely separate from the Lancaster legacy. Trade journals featured my work. Competitors tried to poach me. All this while Douglas, back at Lancaster, was handed increasing authority despite a string of failed product launches under his belt. Eleanor Wright, my grandfather's former assistant, who was still at the company, would call me with updates. "Your father approved another $3 million for Douglas's pet project today," she'd sigh. "The board is getting nervous, but no one dares challenge Harold directly." At 27, I knew it was time to go back. Lancaster Technologies was clearly faltering, innovation slowing, market share shrinking. My father, with a noticeable reluctance, finally offered me a position. Special Projects Manager. No team. A tiny office in the basement. Be grateful, he snapped when I merely questioned the title. Most people would kill for a foot in the door. Hey. Oh, he had no idea. I had spent years meticulously preparing for this exact moment. I'd devoured every aspect of the business, understanding our products better than anyone, perhaps even better than my grandfather had. And, most importantly, I had a growing, sickening suspicion that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong with the company's finances. I took the job with a perfectly composed smile. Thank you for the opportunity, Dad, I said, watching his surprise at my easy acceptance. I won't disappoint you. It was the very last promise I would ever keep to him. My first 6 months back were a masterclass in corporate politics. I kept my head down, worked longer hours than anyone else, systematically absorbing every detail of the company's current operations. My basement office became my clandestine command center, walls covered in timelines, market analyses, and organizational charts. If people thought I was just a desperate young woman trying to prove herself, that was perfectly fine by me. Our cardiovascular device division was in serious trouble. Sales had plummeted 30% in 2 years, and a major hospital chain was about to jump ship. I spent my weekends deep diving, studying patient outcomes, interviewing doctors, dissecting competitor products. The problem crystallized. Our devices were reliable, yes, but they hadn't evolved with new surgical techniques. So, I developed a prototype for a modified device, perfectly compatible with minimally invasive procedures. After rigorous testing, I presented the concept to the division head. He was impressed enough to allocate resources for development. Within 4 months, we had a working prototype that surgeons were raving about in initial trials. The morning of the quarterly board meeting, I was ready, prepared to present our solution, complete with projected revenue recovery. But when I walked into the boardroom, he was already there. My father, standing at the head of the table, presenting my work, my slides, my research, my prototype, as if it were his own. As I have been directing the team, he said smoothly, we've developed a solution to the cardiovascular division's challenges. I stood frozen in the doorway, a knot of ice forming in my stomach. Board members nodded approvingly, taking notes. Victor, my grandfather's friend, caught my eye, a slight frown on his face, but he said nothing. When my father finished, applause filled the room. Audrey, he finally acknowledged my presence. Nice of you to join us. Take a seat, if you can find one. The only empty chair was tucked away in the corner, far from the table. I sat, a professional smile plastered on my face, while a silent, furious rage burned through me. After the meeting, I confronted him in his office. Those were my designs, I stated, trying to keep my voice steady. My research, my prototype. I deserve credit for my work. He barely glanced up from his computer. You work for Lancaster Technologies. Everything you develop belongs to the company. To me, I corrected, my voice cracking slightly. Finally, he looked at me, irritation hardening his features. You know what you deserve. To be grateful. I gave you any position here at all. Douglas would have solved the cardiovascular problem eventually. He paused, his face cold. Go back to your little projects, Audrey. The adults are running the business. The very next week, company-wide emails announced Douglas's promotion to Executive Vice President of Product Development, citing his innovative solution to the cardiovascular crisis. My name? It was no way. By the way, if you're still with me on this unbelievable journey, wondering how far a family will go to protect a lie, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happened next. And trust me, there are more stories like this to share. That very night, Eleanor called me. Are you sitting down? She asked, her voice hushed. I braced myself. She'd been cleaning out old storage files and found something critical, a draft of my grandfather's will dated just 2 months before he died. We met at a coffee shop, and she handed me a manila envelope, copies she'd made before carefully replacing the originals. Inside, the truth hit me like a physical blow. It explicitly stated that his controlling shares of Lancaster Technologies were to be held in trust until I turned 30, then transferred directly to me. This was never executed, I whispered, my fingers tracing the words. The will that went through probate left everything to my father. Eleanor nodded grimly. There's more. I kept reading. The envelope also contained a chilling series of emails between my father and the family attorney, dated just days after my grandfather's death. They discussed modifications to the will before filing it, ensuring continuity of leadership without complications. He changed the will, I thought, a cold dread seeping into my bones. It appears so, Eleanor confirmed. And there's something else. The company financial reports, small inconsistencies, easy to miss if you're not looking closely, but they've been growing. The next day, I ran into Stephanie in the executive wing. She stopped me with a perfectly manicured hand on my arm. Audrey, darling, we haven't had a proper chat in ages. Lunch this week. Her sudden interest piqued my curiosity. We met at an exclusive downtown restaurant, where she ordered a $100 bottle of wine before noon. I worry about you, she purred, studying me over her glass. All work and no social life. At your age, I was already married. I'm focused on my career, I replied. Yes, but is it making you happy? You keep pushing for recognition that your father can't give you. I slowly set down my fork. Cannot or will not. Her smile tightened, just a fraction. Harold built this company into what it is today. It pains him to see you constantly challenging his decisions. Douglas, now, he understands how to support your father, rather than compete with him. Is that what you think I'm doing? I asked, my voice dangerously even. Competing. Darling, she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We both know you've always wanted what Harold built. But some things aren't meant to be. Perhaps if you found fulfillment elsewhere, you wouldn't need to prove yourself here. In that precise moment, her mask completely slipped. I saw the raw calculation in her eyes, the fierce, protective mother ensuring her son's inheritance. I gave her my most pleasant smile. Thank you for your concern, Stephanie. I'll give it some thought. As we parted, she added, your father is under tremendous pressure. Try not to add to his burden with unrealistic expectations. That afternoon, I began compiling a mental list of allies within the company. There were division heads who had praised my work, engineers who respected my technical knowledge, and administrative staff who had been there since my grandfather's time. I knew I would need them all if my growing suspicions proved correct. My most surprising ally emerged 2 weeks later during a routine product safety review. Jackson Wright, recently hired into the legal department, questioned some contract language that seemed deliberately designed to obscure liability. We ended up working late, ordering takeout, dissecting the documentation. This isn't my first rodeo with vague safety language, he said, loosening his tie. My last firm specialized in corporate malfeasance cases. Defending the corporations. I asked. Sometimes helping whistleblowers. He studied me for a moment. The cardiovascular device modifications, those were yours, weren't they? Not Douglas's. I stiffened. What makes you say that? The technical language and the specifications, he explained. Douglas can barely explain how the devices work in layman's terms, let alone articulate the engineering principles. I said nothing, but Jackson simply nodded, as if my silence confirmed everything. Corporate families are complicated, he mused. I've seen how they can rot from the inside. Over the next several weeks, a disturbing pattern of financial irregularities began to emerge in my meticulous research. Research funds allocated to projects that yielded absolutely no results. Consulting fees paid to companies that seemed to exist only on paper. Offshore accounts receiving regular, massive transfers for international market development in countries where we had zero presence. Each new discovery was a chilling piece of a puzzle I wasn't yet ready to assemble. But the picture taking shape looked increasingly like systematic fraud, with my father at its very center. I needed more, undeniable evidence, before I could act. All the while, I continued producing exceptional work, building my internal reputation, outwardly accepting my limited role. Douglas took credit for 2 more of my innovations. My father denied every single one of my requests for a team. Stephanie hosted lavish parties, seating me as far as possible from any potential networking opportunity. But I was patient. I was watching. And the truth, one betrayal at a time, was finally coming into focus. 6 months after my return, the company hosted its annual charity gala. This was Stephanie's pride and joy, a $500,000 spectacle designed to raise money for children's medical research and, more importantly, to generate glowing press for Lancaster Technologies. The grand ballroom of the city's most exclusive hotel was packed with executives, board members, major clients, and local politicians. I wore a simple black gown, elegant but deliberately understated. Douglas arrived with a model whose name he kept forgetting. My father and Stephanie made their grand entrance 30 minutes late, ensuring every single eye was on them. From my peripheral table, I watched their performance of The Perfect Family. They do put on quite a show, Victor murmured beside me. He, too, had found himself increasingly marginalized for questioning my father's recent decisions. The Lancaster legacy, on full display, I replied, sipping my champagne. Not the full legacy, Victor said meaningfully. Your grandfather would have handled things differently. Midway through dinner, I excused myself. Instead of the ladies' room, I slipped into a service corridor and made my way to the hotel's business center. Using the access code Eleanor had provided, I logged into Lancaster Technologies' secure server. For a tense 20 minutes, my hands trembled slightly as I downloaded financial documents from restricted folders. Reports filled the screen. Company funds diverted through a labyrinth of subsidiaries, research budgets manipulated, tax documents altered. The irregularities I'd suspected were just the surface of a systematic fraud spanning years. As I was about to log out, I found it. One more folder, labeled William Estate. Inside, the smoking gun. The original version of my grandfather's will, exactly as Eleanor had described, leaving controlling interest to me when I turned 30. And alongside it, documentation detailing how it had been altered after his death. I transferred everything to an encrypted drive, my heart thundering, and returned to the gala, my expression carefully neutral. Later, when Douglas drunkenly clinked his glass for an impromptu speech about continuing the Lancaster legacy of innovation, I applauded politely, mentally tallying every federal law my father had likely broken. The evening culminated with my father announcing a new children's hospital wing, named after Stephanie. The irony was a bitter pill. My mother had dedicated her life to those hospitals. Now Stephanie was literally putting her name on her legacy. As guests began to depart, my father summoned key executives back to our home for his infamous nightcap strategy discussions. These after-parties were where the real business decisions were made, over expensive scotch. For once, I was included, perhaps because excluding the only actual Lancaster present would have seemed too obvious to the clients still milling about. The estate glowed, cars pulling into the circular driveway. Staff took coats, served drinks. I watched my father hold court, board members and executives laughing at his jokes, desperate for his approval. The power he wielded was intoxicating to them. Around midnight, as discussions broke into smaller groups, I quietly slipped away to my father's home office. I needed one final piece of evidence, hard copies of bank statements that would directly link him to the corporate fraud. He was too cautious to keep everything digital. I was photographing documents with my phone when the door suddenly opened. My father stood there, a glass of scotch in his hand, his expression shifting from surprise to cold fury. "What are you doing in here?" he demanded. I straightened, my phone slipping into my pocket. "Looking for that Anderson proposal you mentioned earlier." "In my desk drawers," he scoffed. We stared at each other, the decades of pretense between us finally crumbling. I thought of all the times I had yearned for his approval, his recognition, all the brilliant work I'd done for his company, all the lies he'd told. "I know about grandfather's will," I said, my voice quiet, cutting through the tension. "The real one." The color drained from his face. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Oh, I do. I know about the offshore accounts, the diverted research funds, the tax fraud." He carefully set down his glass. You think you understand business at your age? Sometimes, complex strategies look questionable to inexperienced eyes. Fraud looks like fraud to federal prosecutors. I shot back. His expression hardened. Are you threatening me? I'm telling you I know the truth about everything, including how you built your precious empire on stolen inheritance and criminal activity. You ungrateful little. He stopped himself, visibly struggling to control his rage. Everything I did was to build this company, to create a legacy you stole from me. You? He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You could never handle what I've built. You're too much like your mother. Soft, sentimental. This company needs a strong leader. Like Douglas. I challenged. The alcoholic who takes credit for other people's work. His face flushed a dark, angry red. At least he understands loyalty. Is that what you call it? I asked, stepping closer. I call it enabling criminal behavior. He advanced, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You will not threaten this family. Everything you have, I gave you. No, I counted. Everything I should have had, you took from me. Something primal snapped in his eyes. You are nothing without the Lancaster name. Nothing. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my skin. I tried to pull away, but his rage was now fully unleashed. As I turned to leave, he shoved me, hard, toward the door. But instead of opening, the heavy wooden door held firm. My momentum propelled me forward, and I crashed through the glass panel beside it. The sound was deafening, sickening. Sharp, searing pain exploded across my back and arms as glass rained down on me. I landed hard on the hallway floor, stunned, disoriented. A warm wetness spread across my face. Blood. Silence fell, absolute and terrible, as every party guest turned to stare. Stephanie appeared in the living room doorway, her hand flying to her mouth. Douglas stood behind her, eyes wide, shocked. My father stood frozen, still in the doorway, the horrific realization of what he had done slowly dawning on his face. For a fleeting moment, he looked like a terrified old man, all illusions of power stripped away by one brutal act. I touched my face, my fingers coming away red. A strange calm settled over me. I looked up at him, blood trickling down my cheek, and a slow, deliberate smile spread across my lips. You just lost everything, I whispered. Stephanie rushed forward, suddenly all performative concern for the shocked guests. She tripped, she announced loudly. Too much champagne. Let's get you cleaned up, Audrey. No one moved to help me. I rose slowly, tiny glass fragments tinkling from my dress, blood dripping onto the pristine marble floor. Douglas took a step forward, perhaps to guide me away from the stunned onlookers. But I shook my head. Don't touch me, I said, clearly, firmly. None of you touch me. I walked straight through the silent, staring crowd, head held high, feeling the blood dry on my skin. Behind me, I heard my father instructing guests that the party was over. Stephanie's nervous, forced laughter. Douglas offering to drive someone home. Back in my bathroom, I meticulously examined the damage. Dozens of small cuts crisscrossed my arms and back. A deeper gash, the source of most of the blood, ran along my hairline. As I carefully removed fragments of glass and disinfected the wounds, my decision solidified. Years of theft, fraud, lies, manipulation. It all ended tonight. I had everything I needed, undeniable proof, and now, even witnesses to my father's violence. The perfectly crafted facade of Lancaster family perfection had shattered along with that glass door. By morning, the entire empire would follow. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The throbbing pain from the cuts kept me elate, but it was adrenaline and a cold, hard resolve that truly kept exhaustion at bay. After treating the worst of my injuries, I changed into practical clothes and began to execute the plan I had been mentally refining for months. First, I backed up all the evidence to 3 separate, secure locations: a cloud server, a physical drive hidden in my apartment, and a set of documents I'd already mailed to Jackson's personal address days earlier as an insurance policy. If anything happened to me, Those instructions would ensure everything reached the proper authorities. As I worked, memories surfaced, unbidden. My grandfather, proudly showing me the first medical device he ever patented. My mother's gentle guidance. And then, the crushing realization that my father saw me as a rival, not his daughter. The slow, painful erosion of my place in my own family. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor. Are you all right? Hearing concerning rumors about an incident at the gala. My reply was brief, I'm fine. Be ready tomorrow. Everything changes. She responded instantly, whatever you need. Eleanor had been loyal to my grandfather for 30 years. After he died, she stayed at Lancaster Technologies, partly out of loyalty to his memory, and partly, I now suspect, to keep an eye on my father. She'd watched the company change under his leadership, seen the insidious shift from patient-focused innovation to profit-driven shortcuts. I remembered a conversation we'd had 6 months prior, shortly after I returned. We were reviewing old product development files when she suddenly closed the folder. Your grandfather had a saying, she told me, never mistake the name on the building for ownership of what happens inside it. What did he mean? I'd asked. Lancaster Technologies, she'd explained, belongs to the patients whose lives depend on our products, to the employees who dedicate their careers to the mission, to the principles of innovation and integrity. She fixed me with a meaningful look. He didn't build this company for one person to treat as a personal kingdom. That conversation had haunted me, fueling my growing suspicions about my father's management. Now, as dawn approached, I gathered the final pieces of my plan. At 4:30 a.m., I called Victor. He answered on the second ring, his voice surprisingly alert for the hour. I saw what happened, he said without preamble. Are you injured? Nothing serious, I replied, but I need to meet with you before the markets open. I've discovered significant irregularities in the company finances. Criminal irregularities. There was a beat of silence. I've had concerns for some time, he admitted. Your father has been blocking full financial reviews. I have the evidence, I stated. All of it. Another pause. My home office. 6 a.m. Bring everything. Next, I contacted 3 other board members, individuals I believed would prioritize the company over blind loyalty to my father. Brief, careful messages requesting urgent meetings regarding material financial concerns. 2 responded immediately, agreeing to conference calls later that morning. At 5:15 a.m., I reached out to Jackson. Despite the hour, he answered promptly. I need legal counsel, I said, unofficially, before I take official action. Is this about what I think it is? He asked. Yes, I confirmed. And more. There was an incident last night. I heard whispers. How badly are you hurt? I'll live. Can you meet me at my apartment in 30 minutes? It's secure, and I have what you might need. Jackson, I knew, had extensive experience with corporate whistleblower cases. Before joining Lancaster Technologies, he'd helped expose similar fraud at 2 other major companies. He'd been hired while my father was traveling, his resume approved by the head of legal, who had since been unceremoniously pushed into early retirement. When I arrived at his apartment, he took one look at my face, the bandage at my hairline, and wordlessly poured me a cup of coffee. Start from the beginning, he said, pulling out a legal pad. Everything you found, and everything that happened last night. 4 to 5 intense minutes. I laid it all out. The financial discrepancies, the altered will, the insidious pattern of control and isolation, and finally, the violent culmination at the gala afterparty. You have enough for the SEC, the IRS, and likely criminal charges, he confirmed, reviewing my meticulous documentation. But you need to truly consider what this means. Going public burns everything to the ground. The company's stock will plummet. Jobs could be lost. Your family name tarnished permanently. I have considered all of that, I replied, meeting his gaze. I've also considered what happens if this continues. Patient safety compromised for profit. Employees unwittingly working for a criminal enterprise. My grandfather's legacy corrupted beyond recognition. Jackson studied me for a moment. There's no halfway option here. Once you pull this trigger, you cannot take it back. I know. And you're ready for the personal cost. Your father will likely face prison. Your relationship with your family destroyed forever. I touched the bandage on my forehead, feeling the faint sting of the cut beneath. That relationship was destroyed long ago. I admitted. I just didn't want to admit it. Jackson nodded slowly. Then let's make sure this is done right. Maximum impact, minimum legal exposure for you. Together, we crafted precise communications for each recipient. The SEC would receive comprehensive financial records. The board members would get summary evidence and emergency protocols for company stabilization. Select journalists would receive carefully curated information packages, timed for release only after official investigations began. What about your claim to controlling interest? Jackson asked, referring to the altered will. One battle at a time, I said. First, we stop the criminal activity. Then, we can address ownership through proper legal channels. By 9 a.m., I had met with Victor and another board member, Patricia Alvarez. Both were ashen-faced after reviewing my evidence. We'll need to call an emergency board meeting, Victor declared. Suspend Harold pending investigation. He'll fight it, Patricia warned. Let him, I replied, my voice firm. The evidence speaks for itself. At 10 a.m., I returned to my apartment to make final preparations. My phone was a silent accusation, accumulating 23 missed calls from my father, 12 from Stephanie, and 9 from Douglas. I ignored them all. Instead, I called 3 journalists known for their thorough reporting on corporate malfeasance. Each conversation was brief, professional, ending with scheduled delivery of documentation later that day. As noon approached, a flicker of hesitation tried to creep in. Was I truly ready to dismantle my family in such a public, devastating way? Then I remembered my grandfather's unwavering integrity, my mother's profound compassion, the values they had instilled in me, values that had been brutally betrayed by my father's greed. I remembered the feeling of glass shattering against my skin, and the look in my father's eyes that night. Not remorse, but pure, unadulterated rage that I had forced him to reveal his true, ugly nature. I made one final call to Eleanor. It's happening today, I told her. Be prepared for chaos. I have been prepared for years. Audrey, she replied, her voice steady and strong. Your grandfather would be proud. At 12:30 p.m., I sent the first batch of evidence to the SEC through their whistleblower portal. At 12:45, comprehensive documentation went out to the 7 board members I trusted. At 1 p.m., I provided secure access to selected documents to the journalists. Then, I waited, knowing the meticulously constructed empire of lies was finally about to collapse. The first domino fell at 2:17 p.m. Victor called. The SEC has contacted legal, he said. No greeting, no preamble. They are requesting all financial records be preserved immediately. Harold is being summoned to an emergency board meeting at 4. Has he responded? I asked, my heart thumping. Not yet. His assistant says he's in meetings off-site. My father, no doubt, was in full damage control mode, desperately trying to pinpoint the source of the leak. He wouldn't suspect me immediately. He believed his display of power the previous night had put me firmly in my place. Keep me informed, I told Victor. And Victor, thank you for doing the right thing. This company was your grandfather's life's work, he replied. Someone needs to save it from your father. At 3:30 p.m., Jackson texted me. Federal agents just entered the building. Executive floor in lockdown. Files being secured. Things were moving even faster than I'd anticipated. I'd expected at least a full day before federal involvement became visible. Someone on the board must have made additional calls, perhaps directly to the FBI or Department of Justice. My phone rang again. Douglas. For the 10th time, I declined the call. By 4 p.m., I realized I needed one last, crucial piece of evidence from my father's home. With everyone's attention on corporate headquarters, the family estate would likely be empty. I took a ride-share, not my own car, and had the driver drop me 2 blocks away. The house was eerily quiet as I approached. Minimal staff on a weekday afternoon. I used my key, slipping in through the side door near the kitchen, listening intently for any movement. Nothing. I made my way to my father's home office. The glass door had been hastily boarded up with plywood. Dried blood still stained the marble floor where I had fallen. I stepped carefully around it and entered. His desk appeared untouched. I went directly to the hidden safe behind the hunting painting, another of my grandfather's traditions my father had co-opted without understanding its true significance. The combination, my grandfather's birthday, perhaps out of sentimentality or pure laziness, my father had kept it the same. Inside, I found it, the original copy of my grandfather's will, complete with my father's handwritten notes indicating the changes to be made. Next to it, a small leather journal, my grandfather's meticulous documentation of his true intentions for the company's succession. And beside that, account information for private offshore holdings, detailing where vast company funds had been diverted. I photographed everything. Then, I carefully replaced the items, except for the journal. That, I slipped into my bag. It wasn't technically evidence of crimes, but it was my birthright, a direct window into my grandfather's true wishes. As I closed the safe and replaced the painting, I heard a door close somewhere else in the house. Footsteps approached down the hallway. I quickly moved behind the large desk, crouching out of sight. The office door opened. From my hiding place, I could see Douglas's expensive shoes step inside. He moved to the desk, frantically opening drawers, shuffling through papers. His movements were erratic, panicked. "Where is it?" he muttered. "Where would he keep it?" He was clearly looking for something specific, incriminating evidence, no doubt. My father must have sent him to clear out anything damaging before authorities thought to search the house. Douglas moved toward the safe. As he shifted the painting, I knew I had to leave. Now, while he was distracted, fumbling with the safe combination, I slowly edged toward the door, staying low, moving stealthily behind furniture. I was almost at the doorway when his phone rang, startling us both. I froze as he answered. "Yes, I'm here now," he said, his voice tense. "Looking exactly where you said." "No, I haven't found it yet." "They what? When? How many agents? Jesus." His voice rose in alarm. "Yes, I understand." He ended the call, slamming his fist against the wall. Damn it. Whatever he'd just learned had clearly escalated the situation dramatically. As he turned back to the safe, I seized my moment, slipping out the door, staying close to the wall to avoid the old, creaking floorboards I remembered from childhood. I made it to the side door and out of the house, undetected. Once clear of the property, I checked my phone. 5 missed calls from Eleanor, and a text. FBI at headquarters. Complete lockdown. Harold being questioned. It was happening even faster than I'd anticipated. I called Eleanor from a coffee shop 2 miles from the estate. "What's the situation?" I asked, my voice tight. "Agents everywhere," she replied in a hushed voice. "They arrived with warrants for financial records going back 7 years. Harold is in the conference room with federal agents and company attorneys." Stephanie tried to leave the building, but was escorted back inside. And the board? Emergency session in progress. Victor's leading. They are discussing a temporary leadership structure pending investigation. I absorbed this information. "Where are you now?" "Records department. They've asked us to facilitate document access." "Stay safe," I told her. "This will get uglier before it improves." My next call was to Jackson. "I need to know if I should come in or stay away." "Stay away," he advised immediately. "The board knows you're the whistleblower, but it's better if you're not physically present while federal agents are conducting initial interviews. I've informed select agents that you are available to provide testimony when needed. Has my father figured it out yet?" "Yes." Jackson's voice was grim. "When agents mentioned the altered will, he apparently shouted something about you before his attorney shut him down. At 6 p.m., I checked into a hotel under a pseudonym, just as Jackson had advised. From this secure location, I monitored developments through secure communications with my allies inside the company. The evening news ran the first stories: federal investigation at Lancaster Technologies, medical device giant facing fraud allegations, Lancaster CEO under investigation. None mentioned me specifically yet, but I knew that would come. I had provided the journalists with enough background that the full story would emerge in waves, each more damaging than the last. At 9:12 p.m., my father finally called again. Against my better judgment, I answered. Why? His voice was hoarse, barely recognizable. You know why. I replied. Do you have any idea what you've done? He pleaded. The company will not survive this. The company will survive, I countered, without the fraud and corruption. He was silent for a moment. Then, with cold fury, you planned this. All of it. Coming back to the company, gaining access. I came back to save what grandfather built. I said, my own voice firm. I gave you chances to do the right thing. By destroying your own family. This company supports hundreds of employees. Patients depend on our products. Don't pretend this is about employees or patients. This is about what you stole from the company, from shareholders, from me. His voice suddenly shifted, pleading, a tone I had never heard from him before. Audrey, please, whatever you think I've done, we can resolve this privately, as a family. We stopped being a family the moment you decided I was a threat rather than your daughter, I said. I paused, then delivered the final blow. Or perhaps it was when you altered grandfather's will to disinherit me. Silence. A deafening silence. Then, you can't prove that. I already have. It's all in the hands of authorities now. I'll fight this, he growled, the brief vulnerability replaced by his old arrogance. With every resource I have. Those resources, I said, are being frozen as we speak. I ended the call and turned off my phone. The die was cast. My evidence was with the authorities, the board, and soon, the public. There was no stopping what would come next. At the hotel room desk, I opened my laptop and reviewed one final email. It contained my formal statement to the board, requesting emergency appointment as interim CEO based on my grandfather's documented intentions and my qualifications. Victor had helped draft it, believing the company desperately needed a Lancaster at the helm to weather the coming storm, but one untainted by the scandal. My finger hovered over the send button. Once sent, I will be volunteering to step into the very center of the hurricane, to take responsibility for saving a company on the verge of collapse, to face intense public scrutiny and potential backlash. I thought of my grandfather's words. Business is about more than profit. It is about purpose. And with a deep breath, I pressed send. My hotel room phone shrieked at 5:30 a.m., dragging me from a fitful, adrenaline-fueled sleep. It was Victor. Turn on the news, he said. No hello. I fumbled for the remote, clicking on the television. A Samba news anchor was already mid-sentence. Federal agents executed search warrants at both Lancaster Technologies headquarters and the Lancaster family estate late into the night. Sources confirmed CEO Harold Lancaster and Chief Financial Officer Martin Wells have been taken in for questioning. The screen showed my father, face ashen, being escorted into a black SUV. Stephanie followed behind him, flanked by agents. Douglas was conspicuously absent. The board voted at 4 a.m. Victor continued. Harold has been suspended pending investigation. Wells terminated. Your appointment as interim CEO was approved by a narrow margin. I sat on the edge of the bed, stunned, despite having orchestrated these very events. When do they need me there? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. 9 a.m. Board meeting to formalize the transition. Federal agents want to interview you at 11. Press conference tentatively scheduled for 2 p.m. The machine was in motion now, unstoppable. I'll be there. After a quick shower, I dressed with meticulous care, a conservative navy suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back to partially conceal the bandage on my forehead. I needed to project stability, unwavering confidence, not appear as either a victim or a vindictive daughter. On the drive to headquarters, my phone buzzed incessantly with messages and calls. The story had broken wide open overnight. 3 major business publications had already run detailed exposés on the financial fraud, citing anonymous whistleblowers and company insiders. One had even directly referenced the altered will, though without naming me specifically. The Lancaster Technologies parking lot was a zoo, crammed with news vans and reporters. Security personnel had to escort me through a side entrance, bypassing the media gauntlet. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Employees huddled in small groups, their conversations abruptly ceasing as I passed. Eleanor met me at the executive elevator. "They know it was you," she said quietly. "Not officially, but word has spread." "How are the employees taking it?" "Shocked, confused, afraid for their jobs," she hesitated, then added, "but also, there's relief among some. Your father's management style had become increasingly erratic. People have been walking on eggshells for months." The executive floor was eerily quiet. Federal agents had commandeered several offices, boxes of documents stacked everywhere. Victor waited for me in what had been my father's office, now stripped of all personal items. "The initial financial assessment is worse than we thought," he said, closing the door behind me. "The fraud extends beyond what even your evidence showed. Wells has apparently been cooperating with authorities since midnight, implicating your father in exchange for leniency." I nodded, unsurprised. The company's stock trading was halted before market open. We expect a 30 to 40% drop when it resumes. Major hospital chains are already calling, demanding reassurance about supply continuity. The FDA has requested emergency meetings regarding product safety. Any indication of actual safety issues? This was my greatest fear, the one thing I couldn't compromise. Patient lives. Initial reviews suggest the fraud was purely financial, not product-related, he confirmed. Your father may have been corrupt, but he wasn't stupid enough to risk liability for defective medical devices. Small comfort, but critical. We spent the next hour preparing for the board meeting, reviewing talking points and transition plans. At 8:45 a.m., my phone rang. "Stephanie." Against my better judgment, I answered. "How could you?" she hissed, her voice raw with either tears or rage. "Your own father. He made his choices," I replied, my voice even. "Years of them. They arrested him in front of everyone. Do you have any idea what this is doing to Douglas? To me." "Where is Douglas, by the way?" I asked. "I noticed he wasn't with you and father last night." A beat of silence. "Is dealing with this in his own way." Translation: likely drunk or in hiding. "Stephanie," I said, "I have a board meeting to attend. Was there something specific you needed?" "You will regret this," she spat, her voice hardening. "When the dust settles, you will have nothing and no one. Family is everything, Audrey." "That's exactly why I did this," I countered. "For my real family. For what they built and what they believed in." I ended the call as Victor signaled it was time. The boardroom was a crucible of tension, divided between directors who had reluctantly supported my appointment and those still fiercely loyal to my father. I entered, chin held high, and took the seat at the head of the table, the seat that had been my father's for 2 decades. "Good morning," I began calmly. "I recognize this is an unprecedented situation for Lancaster Technologies. I want to assure each of you that my priority is stabilizing the company, cooperating fully with all investigations, and ensuring the continued production of the life-saving devices our patients depend on." For the next hour, we tackled immediate concerns, communication strategies, leadership transition, regulatory compliance. I outlined a 90-day stabilization plan, emphasizing transparency and accountability. By the meeting's end, even the most skeptical directors seemed cautiously supportive. At 11 a.m., I met with the federal investigators. For 2 intense hours, I walked them through my evidence, answered their questions about company operations, and formally filed my whistleblower statement. They were particularly interested in the altered will and my father's elaborate methods of concealing financial transactions. "We'll need you to testify if this goes to trial," the lead investigator informed me. "I understand," I replied. "I'm prepared to do whatever is necessary." The press conference at 2 p.m. was a tightly controlled spectacle. Standing at the podium, with Victor and the board chairman flanking me, I faced dozens of cameras and reporters. Lancaster Technologies has a 50-year history of developing medical devices that save lives. I began. That mission remains unchanged. While we address serious allegations regarding financial improprieties under previous leadership, Our commitment to patients, healthcare providers, and ethical business practices stands firm. I skillfully parried questions about my father, deflecting to the ongoing investigation. When asked about my new role, I emphasized my qualifications and lifelong connection to the company's founding mission. As the press conference concluded, a reporter shouted, "Miss Lancaster, is it true you were physically assaulted by your father before reporting his crimes?" The room fell silent. The bandage on my forehead suddenly felt glaringly conspicuous. I met the reporter's eye. "I will not be discussing family matters. This is about Lancaster Technologies, its employees, and the patients who depend on our products. Thank you." Back in the executive office, reports continued to flood in. The company's stock had indeed plummeted 35% upon resuming trading. 3 executive vice presidents had resigned. Customers were demanding reassurances. Partners were invoking contract review clauses. Through it all, I maintained an outward composure I did not entirely feel, making decisions, directing resources, projecting an unwavering confidence. By evening, patterns of support began to emerge. Long-term employees rallied around the promise of renewed integrity. Industry partners who had known my grandfather expressed cautious optimism about my leadership. At 8 p.m., Eleanor brought me dinner at my desk and an update. "Douglas has been located," she said. "He attempted to access sensitive servers before security removed him from the building. Jackson is handling the legal aspects." I nodded tiredly. "Any word on my father?" "Released on bail, but restricted from entering company property. The family estate has been designated a secondary crime scene. He and Stephanie are staying at their lake house." "And the employees?" Eleanor's expression softened. "Doing better than expected. There were initial shockwaves, but your afternoon address to staff helped considerably. People appreciate honesty after months of obvious gaslighting from leadership." Around 10 p.m., Jackson arrived with additional updates. "The federal case is expanding. They found connections to tax evasion through the offshore accounts. The prosecutor is talking potential plea deals to avoid trial." "Will he take one?" I asked, knowing my father's immense pride. "His attorneys will push for it. 15 to 20 years potential sentencing otherwise." The brutal reality of what I had set in motion hit me anew. My father, for all his flaws, facing prison in his 60s. A family shattered beyond repair. My own life, forever altered. Having second thoughts, Jackson asked gently, reading my expression. "No," I said after a moment. "Just processing the scope of it all." "For what it's worth," he offered, "what you did took extraordinary courage. Many people suspected problems, but looked the other way for years." I thought of the glass shattering around me, the decades of manipulation and betrayal, the legacy nearly destroyed by greed. "It wasn't courage," I replied. "It was necessity." By midnight, I finally left headquarters for my hotel. Security concerns made returning to my apartment inadvisable for now. As the car pulled away from the building, I saw the illuminated Lancaster Technologies sign, my family name glowing against the night sky. For the first time in years, it felt like it truly belonged to me again. 6 months after that horrific night, the night my father pushed me through a glass door, I stood at the podium of our quarterly investor meeting. The boardroom was packed, a sea of analysts and major shareholders, all eager to hear how Lancaster Technologies had weathered the storm. "The past 2 quarters," I began, gesturing to the projections behind me, "have shown remarkable resilience. Stock values have recovered 60% from their low point. Our new ethical compliance framework has received industry-wide recognition. And most importantly, not a single patient has experienced disruption in receiving our life-saving devices." The road to this moment had been nothing short of arduous. That first month after the revelations was pure chaos. 3 class action lawsuits from shareholders, FDA audits of every single production facility, employee uncertainty leading to a 15% voluntary departure rate, and media scrutiny that dissected every single aspect of the Lancaster family drama. The criminal cases, however, had progressed swiftly. Martin Wells, our former CFO, accepted a plea deal in exchange for testimony. 3 other executives quickly followed suit. My father initially vowed to fight every charge, but as the evidence mounted and his former allies abandoned him, his attorneys negotiated a complex agreement, guilty pleas to tax evasion and securities fraud in exchange for dismissal of more serious charges. He received a 7-year sentence, eligible for parole after 4. The financial penalties were severe. The family estate, my childhood home, was seized as partial restitution. I haven't spoken to him since his sentencing hearing. He stayed straight ahead, refusing to meet my eyes as I delivered my victim impact statement. Stephanie filed for divorce 2 weeks after his conviction, negotiating her own settlement to avoid charges of complicity. She moved to Arizona, launching a small skincare line that tellingly, avoided any mention of a Lancaster connection. Douglas faced minor charges related to attempting to destroy evidence, receiving probation and community service. He then promptly vanished to Europe, occasionally appearing in social media posts from yacht parties and ski resorts, funded by whatever resources he'd managed to hide before the collapse. The company's transformation had been my relentless focus. We brought in forensic accountants to meticulously identify every financial irregularity, established new compliance protocols, and restructured the board to include medical ethics experts and patient advocates. We redirected research priorities back to true innovation, not just cost-cutting. Most meaningfully, we established the Grace Lancaster Foundation, named for my mother, dedicated to providing medical devices to underserved communities globally. It was what she would have wanted, what my grandfather had envisioned for the company's broader purpose. Moving forward, I continued, addressing the investors. We are launching 3 new product lines, developed under our revised research protocols. Clinical trials show unprecedented effectiveness rates, and early adopter hospitals report significant improvement in patient outcomes. Victor, now chairman of the board, nodded approvingly from his seat. We had become partners in this rebuilding, his institutional knowledge complementing my vision for the future. Eleanor had accepted a well-deserved promotion to chief of staff, her loyalty finally, properly rewarded. Jackson remained with the company through the transition, then accepted a position with the Justice Department's corporate fraud division, though we maintained our friendship. Someone needs to catch the next Harold Lancaster, he'd explained, before they do too much damage. After the investor meeting, I returned to my office, now redesigned to erase all traces of my father's imposing dark wooden hunting trophies. The space was open, with glass walls, symbolizing the transparency I had brought to the company culture. The physical scars from that night had healed, though a faint line remained at my hairline, visible when I wore my hair up. The emotional landscape was, of course, far more complex. I had lost my family, yes, but I had reclaimed my heritage. The company now truly reflected my grandfather's vision and my mother's values. That evening, I visited my mother's grave for the first time in years. My father had always discouraged these visits, another insidious way of diminishing her influence and memory. I placed white roses, her favorite, against the headstone. I think you would be proud, I said quietly, not of the scandal or the pain, but of rebuilding something worthy of your name. The wind rustled through the nearby trees, the only response, but somehow it was enough. My grandfather's journal had become a profound touchstone during my most difficult moments. One passage, in particular, had guided me through the darkest days of the transition. Business empires rise and fall, but integrity stands eternal. Lancaster Technologies must never value profit above purpose or power above people. If these principles are ever compromised, the company must be cleansed through truth, however painful that process might be. He had known. Somehow, he had known that such a moment might come. Perhaps he had seen the troubling tendencies in my father, leading to his original intention to pass control directly to me. In the months since taking control, I had received hundreds of messages from employees sharing how the cultural transformation had affected their lives. Engineers now empowered to prioritize safety improvements. Sales representatives relieved to promote products they genuinely believed in. Manufacturing staff proud of new quality standards. These messages meant more to me than any financial recovery, more than the restored stock price or industry accolades. They represented the human impact of choosing truth over comfortable lies, of valuing integrity above family loyalty when that loyalty demanded moral compromise. The path forward remains challenging. Trust, once broken, rebuilds slowly. Some customers remain wary. Certain board members still question my experience. Media outlets occasionally revive the scandal for slow news days. But the foundation is solid now, built on truth rather than deception. The Lancaster name is being redefined. One decision, one product, one patient outcome at a time. In quiet moments, I sometimes wonder if my father ever reflects on what he truly lost. Not just freedom or wealth, but the opportunity to be part of something genuinely meaningful, to contribute to a legacy greater than himself, to know the satisfaction of success achieved honorably. I had learned that some forms of betrayal cannot be forgiven, only accepted and moved beyond. That family is defined by values shared, not merely blood connection. That the hardest choices are often the most necessary ones. Most importantly, I had learned that we are not defined by what others believe we deserve, but by what we know to be right and have the courage to defend. If you have ever faced a moment where standing for truth meant losing something precious, I understand that struggle. Sometimes, the greatest victory comes after the most painful sacrifice. Have you experienced a situation where you had to choose integrity over comfort? Leave a comment below and share your story. And if this journey resonated with you, please subscribe for more real-life experiences of overcoming betrayal and finding strength in adversity. Thank you for listening. And remember, your worth is never determined by those who fail to see it.